Maine Community Foundation. Welcome, I'm Laura Reed at Maine Community Foundation. And I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon at lunchtime. And we're going to try to keep this to 30 minutes. I'll be presenting to you for 30 minutes, and then we'll follow that with a question and answer session. And Maine CF has over 20 competitive grant programs, and community building is just one of those grant programs. You can locate a list of all of those grant programs on our website. The Community Building Grant Program is a grassroots grants program that makes grants across the state of Maine. Funding comes from dedicated permanent county funds, but also from other related funds. So you are not applying to a specific fund, but to the Community Building Grant Program. Proposals are reviewed by a committee of local community members who either live or work in that county or region. We have 15 review committees. 12 of those are single county committees, 2 regional committees. Western Mountains would be Franklin and Somerset combined, and Southern Midcoast, which is Lincoln and Saginaw. And then we also have 1 statewide committee that gets seated solely for grant making purposes. The other committees work with us on grant making as well as building philanthropic resources. One of the most frequently asked questions is, who is eligible to apply? And there's more information available on our website, but it includes the following: nonprofit charitable organizations, tax exempt under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, and also classified as an organization described in Sections 509A1 and 509A2. It includes municipalities, public schools, public agencies working for the state of Maine, Indian tribal governments or political subdivisions recognized by the Department of Interior, as well as nonprofit organizations without any of these tax statuses that I mentioned. They may apply using a fiscal sponsor. An organization included in the list that I just shared would have to be eligible to serve as the fiscal sponsor. And you can visit our website for additional information on fiscal sponsorships. Another one of the most frequently asked questions is, will my proposal be shared with donors who have a donor advised fund at Maine CF? All proposals that meet the grant program criteria will be added to our online donor portal for donors to review and consider funding. Staff contacts also share proposals of interest directly with donors who don't use that online portal. Donors may choose to partially or fully fund a proposal. And note that proposals that aren't determined by staff to be eligible, so they either don't meet the eligibility guidelines or the community building criteria, those are not shared with donors. Community building is our largest grant program. It receives the most applications. It also supports the broadest range of projects and organizations across the state. Those include arts, education, environment, economic development, and human services. You can see by the cycle statistics that are on this slide that's showing right now on your screen that 422 applications were received last year. We typically receive over 400 applications. Those applications requested $3.7 million. We awarded 267 grants. 178 of those came from county or regional committees, and 89 of them came from donors. And we just talked about how that process works. Some of them look at the online portal, others hear directly from staff. And those awards were 1.8 awarded across the state, 1.3 was from committees, and 509,000 from donors. We have overall about 47% of applicants received grants, but this really varies by county because the number of applications we receive is different by county. Also, the resources that we have to award are different by county. Some of our county funds have existed for over 35 years. Our newest county fund has existed less than 5 years. So you'd really want to check out the website and look at the web page specifically for your county to learn a little bit more about how that works. And also the Giving Together program is really what allows donors to help fund more at Maine CF. When a donor makes a grant, we will immediately send a letter and a check by regular mail. And the other thing that I'd want you to know here is that the deadline is February 15th at 11:59 p.m. In 2002, that's a Tuesday. I can tell you the maximum grant award is $10,000. And a frequently asked question is, may my organization apply in consecutive years? Yes, one application per grant program per year. Following the 2021 grant cycle, Laura Lee, Maine Community Foundation's Director of Grant Making, who just welcomed you all this afternoon, spoke with several grantees to find out how well this application process worked for them and to discuss what challenges their organizations were facing. We also received valuable feedback in the grant reports that you folks submit to us after you've received a grant. What we heard from nonprofits is that they're still responding to the impacts of the pandemic. They need flexible funding to sustain their organizations, meet challenges, and take advantage of opportunities. So we responded to the information we learned in 4 ways. And those 4 bullets indicate those 4 different ways. We returned to the 3 core criteria for community building. We decided to introduce general support grants. We simplified the application, and we developed additional resources. Those additional resources include a Word version of the online application that has additional guidance embedded in it that you can look at to help assist you as you're filling out the online application, as well as a frequently asked questions document. Essentially, these are the same 3 core criteria we have used in recent years. These have been changed slightly, but not really in a substantive way. Hopefully, some of the changes will make it easier to understand what reviewers are looking for in your responses. So the first criteria listed there is invest in people by increasing skills, knowledge, abilities, and/or well-being. The review committee, when looking at investing in people, will try to understand how people will benefit from your proposed activity. The second criteria, engage the people you serve in the design, delivery, and/or evaluation of the work. Here, the review committee is going to evaluate the breadth and depth of your engagement. And the third criteria, strengthen community resources, including organizations, partnerships, and built-in natural environments. While people are a community resource, here what we're talking about identifying is an additional community resource that the projects will strengthen. The review committee will look to see how a community resource might be improved, used more, or made more accessible. For new or expanding projects, that would be the project grants. So there's 2 different types of funding here, project grants and general support grants. For project grants, it's new or expanding. That's something that we've offered for a while. That's not new if folks have applied before to the Community Building Grant Program. The new projects, that's defined as within the first 2 years of implementation. And we previously defined expanding projects as those projects that served a new geographic region or new content. Actually, we've simplified that now. So when we say expanding, we just simply mean serving more people. General support grants, that's what's really new. That's what folks I think are going to be most excited to hear about, is that previously you had to apply for either project grant or capacity building support. Now we've simplified that. It's project grants or general support. The general support grants are for ongoing programs and operational needs, really for flexible funding. Organizations' primary work must still meet the community building criteria. And here's the part to pay close attention to. You also have to meet the following 3 thresholds to apply for a general support grant. You have to be located in Maine. you have to have had an operating budget below $500,000 in your most recent completed fiscal or financial year, and not be a municipality, government agency, public school, faith-based organization, or fiscally sponsored applicant. Those organizations may be eligible for project grants. They've always been eligible for project grants, but they're not going to be eligible for these general support grants that are focused on organizations that meet these other three thresholds. And so some of you might be wondering a little bit about what is the rationale there, or why are those folks excluded from applying for a general support grant? In the case of municipalities, government agencies, and public schools, main CF funding should not replace public funding sources for general or operating support. For faith-based organizations, we have an eligibility and grant guidelines statement on our website, which indicates we will not fund without exception religious activities, including but not limited to religious services, promotion of religious beliefs, or activities that are restricted to church or religious group membership. Applicants using a fiscal sponsor, also, the IRS indicates that fiscal sponsorships are designed for groups that are doing projects. And for the community building grant program, again, you need to identify the primary counties served. This will determine which committee will review your application and how it will be sorted in our Giving Together donor portal. For project grants, you would need to choose one county that will most directly benefit. If there are 3 or more counties benefiting, then you would choose statewide. So you either choose one county or you choose statewide. And for general support grants, you choose the county where the organization is located. And this next slide is for project grants only. We have a list of ineligible expenses here. And it does not apply to general support grants because those are considered flexible funding and not restricted in any way. So the list here covers general operating expenses, major capital expenses such as building, land, or vehicles, camperships, endowments, capital campaigns, or annual appeals. And in parentheses, you see for general operating support, up to 20% indirect costs are allowed. I want to make sure that I talk about that just a little bit because I know some folks aren't familiar with indirect. Your project budget may include up to 20% of the total amount requested from Maine CF for indirect costs, meaning overhead expenses. These funds may be used for overhead or operating expenses. And some examples of that could be rent, utilities, bookkeeping, but you must label this line in your budget as indirect. And so in the expense items column, you would actually just put in the word indirect. You would not specify the indirect funds and how those would be used. Please note that our eligibility and grant guidelines apply to both project and general support grants. Those are something different than what we just went over. Those eligibility and grant guidelines can be found on our website. And those state that we will not fund without exception expenses already incurred regarding to regranting to a secondary grantee through a competitive process, political campaigns, lobbying defined as calls to action on a specific vote, and religious activities, again, religious services, promotion of religious beliefs, or activities restricted to a religious group membership. We think it would be a little bit helpful for you to hear about how the process works, the schedule as well. This, as I mentioned, there's a deadline of February 15th, and folks receive their award and decline letters at the same time in mid to late May. So what happens between February 15th and the end of May? All proposals received are presented by staff to determine eligibility. Depending on the number of proposals we receive, a subcommittee may also be used to assess alignment with the criteria to limit the final pool of proposals. All proposals included in the final review pool are assigned to a county advisor or staff member who serves as the lead reviewer and follows up with the applicant contact by telephone. And that happens typically in late March or April. And here's something that's important to remember, that you will not receive a telephone call if your proposal is not included in the final review pool. Each county and regional committee collectively reviews all the proposals included in that final review pool for their county or region and decides which proposals to fund. When a donor makes a grant, we'll immediately send a letter and a check by regular mail. So you would hear before mid to late May, which is indicated on this slide. This means that you may receive a check before the review committee meets. If your request was partially funded, the review committee will consider supporting the remaining amount. And if your request was fully funded, the review committee will most likely decline further support so that they may fund other proposals. Donors may also choose to support your proposal after the review committee meets, which means you could be declined by the review committee, but later receive a letter of support with a check from one of our donors. Something less likely to happen, but still possible, is receiving funding over the requested amount. All of the proposals that we receive for community building that are deemed eligible and aligned with the criteria will stay in that donor portal until the end of May. If you've not applied to one of our grant programs after July 2020, then you'll notice we've transitioned to a new, better system. This is a screenshot of what our Maine CF homepage would look like if you searched for mainecf.org. In the upper right-hand corner, you'd see 3 buttons or rectangles. One is yellow, one is green, and one is blue. You click on the yellow button labeled Apply to apply for a grant program. And when you do that, it brings you to a screen that looks like this. You have online grant application or online scholarship application. And you can see the Apply Here button under online grant application has been circled in red. Once you click on that button, you'll see a page that looks like this. And when you come to the online application, if you've previously used our online grant application system, you would type in your login information. And you can see the top circle there in red says login. So you would type it, you would click on that and type in your login information. If you forgot your password, there's an opportunity to click on Forgot Your Password to reset it. And if you have never applied for a grant before, then you're going to click on that register button. And this is your first time submitting an online grant application, so you'd need to create an account. You can create an account using your name and email address or by using one of your social media accounts. And then down the other circle on this page, if you see in red and then an underline, is an indication that you can get step-by-step instructions on how to start a new grant application if you need to. And that text click here in blue has been circled in red. Here's another online resource that you might come to. This is the screenshot of what our Maine CF community building page looks like. To arrive here, you can scroll down on your home page and click on the Spotlight program, which is currently community building, and it will take you straight to this page. This page includes all the community building information, but also several links to additional resources. From here, you can download a Word document with the 2022 application questions and additional guidance. When I mentioned to you earlier when we were during this presentation that we had created some additional resources, that's available here. That's part of the red text that appears right under the word community building. And there's a way to download that document. You can download frequently asked questions. There's a one-page document for that as well. We also plan to have the application translated, and those documents would appear here as well. And following today's session, this will be recorded, and the video link so that folks can watch this after the fact will be on this page as well at the top in red. And staff contacts, these vary by county, and you can see down there again in a red circle with an arrow pointing to it, it says varies by county. If you click on varies by county, it brings you to a list of county and regional program staff members. The list doesn't look quite like this because it's broken down by county, and we've sort of consolidated this to be able to fit it all on one screen for you. There are 8 staff members who staff our county and regional program, as well as another staff member who works with the statewide committee. And I want to point out that there's one staff member missing from this list. Aklas Ahmed is staffing the Cumberland and Southern Midcoast counties and regions, but she just joined us last week. So we're trying to be kind to her and not have her field questions until she's completed her orientation. So for Cumberland, John will continue to field those questions and calls, and I will do that for Southern Midcoast for Lincoln and Saginaw counties. If you're trying to write down furiously all this information on this slide, please know that even as I advance slides, I'm going to come back to this and hold it up for about 5 minutes at the end of our conversation during the question and answer period so that folks can jot down this information. But again, it is all accessible through our website on the community building page if you go down and click on the staff section there that we just looked at. So another frequently asked question is, when would it be helpful to speak with a staff member? Applicants may contact a staff member before submitting an application if you have questions, or you want to determine if your funding request is aligned with our criteria. But I want to be clear that it's not required to speak with a staff member before applying, but certainly an option if you have questions. Applicants who receive a decline letter may also contact a staff member to learn about how to strengthen your application in the future. Be prepared that sometimes we have several suggestions to share with you, and other times all we can tell you is that the applicant pool was very competitive during a given grant cycle. And grantees may also contact staff members to request an extension or to ask follow-up questions concerning your award, or if something changes, something significant changes. So let's say you need to ask again for an extension because sometimes our best project ideas get delayed because of staffing or for other reasons. So you need additional time to use those resources. That might be a time that you would reach out to a staff member. We also have another webinar coming up on January 13th from 12 to 1. My colleague Laura Lee, who you met earlier during the welcome today, is going to be hosting that webinar. And that webinar is going to be focused on applying for grants at Maine CF. We have over 20 competitive grant programs. And so you actually apply to a grant program at Maine CF, not a fund, right? That sometimes trips folks up, that we have over 2,000 funds, but 20 competitive grant over 20 competitive grant programs. So thank goodness you don't have to know which of those 2,000 funds to apply to. And so in terms of community building, that's only one of those 20 competitive grant programs. And so Laura's going to spend some time with folks on January 13th talking about the Maine CF grant programs and also talking about best practices for proposal writing. You'll be able to register for that by going to the grants landing page, and we'll include a link there, and it would be very similar to how you've registered for today. And we'll try to send a follow-up email too, so that you folks will know how to get to that link. So I know some folks may choose to drop off the webinar at this point in time. We're about 30 minutes in, which is about how much time we thought it would take to present the material. And some folks may want to hang around for the question and answer period. So I do want to thank everyone before we move into the question and answer period for joining us today. We really appreciate your interest in the Community Building Grant Program and look forward to working with you. Before we move on to the Q&A, I want to encourage folks to use those additional resources available on our Community Building webpage, both the Word version of the application and the FAQ document. So those were the things on that Community Building webpage that had all that red text at the top, which provided links for you to be able to access. The Word version of the application has lots of guidance included that you wouldn't find in the online application. So it will help direct you as you draft your responses and provide insight to what the reviewers will be looking for when they read your application. We did not include all of that guidance in the application because it makes it way too long. So we hope you'll look at that Word document. If you have basic or simple questions about the information I just shared in this presentation, please use this time to ask your questions. If you have specific questions that relate to your project or organization, please contact one of the appropriate staff contacts that were just on that list. And I'll tab back to that in a little bit so you can write that info down. So if it's really specific, you might want to hold that question, reach out to us by email or telephone to ask that question. To ask a question now, please use the raise hand function. We'll be calling on those folks who raised their hand during the presentation first. And before we do that, I'm going to kick us off by answering another frequently asked question. We've sort of had those throughout this presentation. But some folks will ask us, can we apply for funding for projects that start before June 1st? Yes, but only for expenses incurred after June 1st, as we can't retroactively fund your projects. So we revised the application this year. I said we had revised it in some ways and tried to simplify it. One way was to remove the start and end date for your projects. So the following statement now appears there, and it is, I understand that this program cannot provide funding for activities that occur before June 1. I agree that if our organization receives a grant, it will not be used for expenses already incurred and will be spent within the year. If we're unable to use the funding during the year, we will contact grants@maincf.org. And there's actually a box underneath that in the application for you to check. So you don't have to give the dates again, but now you have to check that box agreeing to those terms. And Laura Lee, MainCF's Director of Grantmaking again, is gonna, at this point in the presentation, we're gonna start the Q&A. She's going to call your name and unmute your mic so you can ask your question, and then she'll mute your mic after you've spoken. And we're going to sort of do a back and forth. I am going to leave the slides up for a little bit longer, and the reason for that is so you can see this information right here. But Laura and I will sort of tag team the question and answer piece. And Laura, how about you kick us off?
Okay, so something's happened that I hadn't anticipated. So we do have hands raised, and we have some questions in the Q&A. So I might, and there's no way for me to tell which came first. So I'm gonna just alternate, I think. So
Laura, why don't we just ask the folks who have put questions in the Q&A to raise their hand?
Yeah, but they're right there, so I can read them off.
You can read them? Okay, I just didn't know how buried they were.
Let's start with Jesse, who has the hand raised, and I will allow you to talk so you can go ahead and speak after you're unmuted.
Thank you so much. I actually have the same question as someone in the Q&A, which is, is there a difference in competitiveness between a project grant and a general support grant?
Laura, are you gonna answer that?
Sure. I wasn't sure if we were, like we'd said we would be alternating, so I wanted to give you a chance. So the question that I heard is there a difference in the competitiveness between a project grant and a general support grant? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this is the first time we've offered general support grants through community building, right? So difficult to say, Jesse, but I would say that we hope that we've designed the application in a way that it actually branches you off. So you answer a set of questions if you're a project grant and a set of questions if you're general support. And we've incorporated in the general support questions, opportunities for you to tell us why this is important, why this funding is important for you. And so we hope that the general support grants will be looked at equally as competitive as project grants. Laura, would you add anything to that?
I would just add that the thing that's hard to know is, for any given committee, like county or region, we just won't know, the proportion of general support requests versus project requests. So I don't think that there's any plan to favor one over the other. I think we certainly want to, but there's no way to ahead of time sort of assign a certain amount or anything, because we may not get equal amounts of requests for both types. So that would be the only thing.
Yeah, I think it will vary greatly among the 15 review committees. And so we'll also be able to provide some statistics on that after the cycle, but this is the first time, so we're not sure.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question from the Q&A. Will MCF consider proposals to support strategic planning efforts under community building funding?
So the way you would apply for that is you would apply for general support. So it used to be that you could apply for capacity building request, right? But that's not how we have it broken out now. You wouldn't apply for strategic planning as a project grant. You would apply for general support and use the money to support your strategic planning.
But what if you're not eligible for general support?
If you're not eligible for general support, I would say no. It has to be a project. So unless your strategic planning is presented as a project in some way, maybe you're reaching out to different folks with different listening sessions, and you're incorporating some project elements into that process. I suppose it's possible, but typically we don't see strategic planning requests that look like project requests.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now I'm gonna ask Becca to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
All right, I have two quick questions specifically related to project grants.
Becca, can you speak up a little bit?
Yes, can you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay, great. I have two quick questions specifically related to project grants. So our organization is in Kennebec County, but hosts guests from a lot of different counties. So is there a benefit / how would you advise, should I do more of a statewide application for a project grant or Kennebec County? Is there a benefit to one versus the other?
So it's really the one that would benefit. So this is a project request, right? For a project grant.
Yes.
So it's the one that would benefit the most. And so it depends on what, I guess, what the project is. You say that you involve folks from across the state, but if the specific project is involving folks more in Kennebec County, then I would apply for Kennebec County. If it's a project that's going to benefit 6 different counties and you're doing outreach in 6 different counties, then you would want to go statewide.
Okay. Okay, great.
It's hard to answer that. I mean, you can certainly ask us a follow-up question offline separately, but without knowing exactly what the project is, the best guidance we can give you is that it's for the county where it will be primarily serving.
Right, right. And then the other question still about the project grants is when it talks about not funding major capital expenses, and then one of them, the examples was buildings. Could you go into a little more detail about that? Like, is that the purchase of a building renovations?
So this is the maximum award is $10,000, right? So it's unlikely that a $10,000 grant can support purchasing building, land, or vehicles. So that's sort of the reason that we say that for projects that's ineligible but at the same time, there are situations where perhaps you could end up using the money in that way, but it would have to be a really specific situation. Laura, do you want to field that one? Do you have a different response?
Yeah, just that for projects, I thought that building renovation, depending on, right, if it's sort of the renovation is necessary to make the project happen. I think that that's when, in my mind, any kind of potential renovation might be eligible. But right, usually for the purchase of a building, I think it's more just that it's right, not going to be very impactful for such a small grant.
Right. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so then I'm gonna go back to the Q&A. Are programs that include working with communities to develop ideas for legislative proposals ineligible? Well, I guess my first thought is legislative, well, I guess I need a little bit more information on the type of legislative proposals, because I think typically anything sort of educational is allowable. I think it's about a specific legislation and a specific position on something that's voted on would probably not be eligible. I think I see you here, Jennifer, with your hand raised. So maybe I will allow you to talk to see if you can give us a little bit more information on that.
Hi, Laura, can you hear me?
Hi. Yep.
Great. Yeah, so the question is, our project is actually reaching out to communities across the state. It's a statewide project to discuss the theme of what will Mainers in 2050 need from their education to thrive personally and socially, civically, and economically. And so we're partnering with Educate Maine, and we have, we don't have right now a legislative agenda. It's more coming out of those conversations. We hope to have not only something that we're working with Educate Maine on to have a kind of a summit, a stakeholder summit, but also so that the nonprofit worlds and for-profit worlds can all be collaborating on realizing these visions. But also there may be something that comes out of that would be proposals for legislators to consider. And so I wouldn't want us to apply for a grant and receive it and then use it and realize that now we were restricting the activity of the conversations. Well,
Laura, you can jump in. My reaction would be, I think that would be fine in terms of being allowable. I mean, I think these sounds like broad conversations, and you're not coming in with a sort of a voting or legislative agenda. That's something that will grow out of, the information you collect in the conversation. So, yes. So to me, that sounds fine.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hold on, okay, so let me go to the next. Michael, I'm gonna allow you to talk and ask your question. Oop, did I ask to unmute?
Okay. Okay, it says
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
oh, okay, good. Yes, I've already done a significant amount of work on the application, and I'm not completed with it, but I've done a lot of work on it, and I did not find, and I found this kind of odd, I did not find a portion of the application where you detailed out how your request for money. In other words, exactly, how you detail it out and how the money would be spent.
Are you talking about the general support request or a project?
It's a general support.
Right. So the reason for that is because general support is unrestricted. It's flexible. It's meant to be that way. So we're not asking is exactly how you will spend it, because that will be up to you, and we realize that may change. And we also don't want, so anyway, because of the nature of the funding is why we didn't ask to sort of detail a budget, because we also don't want you to think that you're somehow committed to that.
Oh, okay, very good. So if I had clicked on project, then there would have been a section where you had to fill in that information.
Exactly. There's a whole project budget, just like, well, we revamped the table, but yes, the same, project budget table. So it's just because of the type of support, the general support.
Okay.
And Michael, if you wanted to see what that looks like, you would go in and open up that Word document that gives the application questions, right? And it will show you both what you see if you're project and what you see if you're general support.
Oh, okay. All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to switch back over to Q&A. Let's see. Will this grant support two arms of a project? So this is a project grant question. This will be for a center where meals will be served and enrichment programs offered. Should we apply for one piece, or can we include both in one application?
So you can absolutely include both in one application, and just be clear about when you're describing it, that it includes these two different components. And you may also have to describe maybe it's all together in the budget for a project grant. Maybe you need to define it in the project grant budget as well, to be able to distinguish for the reviewers. But yes, you can apply for two activities by the same organization.
All right, so let's go to Rich.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Really easy, simple question. When is the portal, when are you able to access the applications on the portal and start inputting online?
Right now.
Oh, okay.
Yep. It's
We
been
opened
open
it-
since December 1st.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. That was very quick and easy. All right, so I'm going back to Q&A. When applying for a project within a municipality, is it better for the town to be the lead or the town committee that is planning and organizing? I think my first reaction, Laura, is probably the town committee is going to be the applicant, because that'll be much more clear what's happening and what you're doing. And then the town would be the fiscal sponsor, because the money has to go to them. So Laura, do you have any?
No, I
Oh,
would
wait.
just agree. I would agree that I think it's most helpful when the committee actually fills out the application and puts themselves in as the grant application contact, or, and because otherwise we end up calling the town and the staff at the town doesn't know the details about what you're proposing to do. So I think it's best if you come in at the committee level, but the applicant can be the town.
Oh, wait,
So-
I think we're just contradicting ourselves. I said the applicant would be the committee and the town would be the fiscal sponsor. Are you saying something different?
That's possible too. Yeah. I have
Okay.
seen situations too where it makes sense for the town to be the applicant, but that the committee actually ends up getting listed as the contact,
Yeah,
and does all of the conversing and filling out of the application. They haven't had to go to the level of actually having a fiscal sponsor. So I think both are feasible. But the
yeah, it
lead-
depends on the relationship, I guess. Betsy, I see you with your hand up, so I'm gonna allow you to talk.
Thank you. Yes, it's a committee of the town. We're doing a renovation of a park, and yes, the money would have to go through the town, but the committee would be the people filling out the forms, and answering most of the questions. So yes, and
Yeah, sorry.
a side question would be, would consultant fee be included in? Would that be a potential thing that could be included in the grant?
Sure, yeah,
Yeah.
and I take back what I said. I think that if it's the committee of the town, I think the town should be the applicant. I don't think you need to have, because we have a required form for fiscal sponsor, and that doesn't really make sense when really you're part of the town as the committee. So I think the
Sometimes-
town should be the applicant. And then, just as Laura said, someone from the committee should be the grant contact and filling out the application.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I would agree. And I think the only thing I would clarify there is there are situations where a town can serve as a fiscal sponsor when it's an organization that's not really functioning under the town's structure, right? So it's a separate nonprofit, but they need a fiscal sponsor, and towns fall in that list of eligible fiscal sponsors. So there are situations where they can, but in this described specific situation, I think the town should be the applicant.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so, okay, I think I'm going back. Brian, I'm gonna allow you to talk. Oh,
I'm
Just
just stopping sharing I think that's been plenty of time for folks to write down the contact.
oh, okay, right. Brian, are you able to unmute yourself?
How's that? You hear me?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Great. This is the first time for our organization to apply and be for a community building grant. And my question is, would our chances for a successful application be greater if we applied for less than the maximum?
So we get people that ask us that question. We want you to apply for what you need, right? So please just, if your project is $30,000 and you need 10,000 from Maine CF, then the maximum amount you can ask for is 10,000. But if you only need 5,000, we want you to ask for 5,000. We really try to encourage our review committees to fully fund when they can. But again, ask for what you need. It doesn't change your likelihood of being funded if you ask for less than 10.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. So let's see, Sarah in the Q&A, do all of the program grants have a max award of 10,000 or do those vary? Those vary. So I would go to the program page on our website. Right at the top, there's sort of like a quick overview, and on there we'll have the max award amount. And so that you can always see that for each program, and they do vary. So I would recommend taking a look at that. Okay, so then Jared, I'm gonna allow you to talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Great, how are you?
good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Well, my question originally was, should we reach out to our county contact first, in our case, Kate Cronin? Even if it is a state project, just to get their guidance or perspective, or should I just jump right up to the state person? Who I didn't, Sherry, was it, or Cherry?
Yes, yeah, Sherry. Yep.
So yeah, I just want to make sure I don't want to waste anyone's time. And I know you always appreciate and welcome the calls and everything, but at the same time, I want to really focus in on who I should be talking to, because I don't want to go the wrong direction if it's a state project.
I'd say if you know for sure that it's a statewide project, then yeah, I would just contact Sherry. That would be my first thought. Laura, do you have any other thoughts?
I would agree. If you know for sure it's serving more than 3 counties, I would just go ahead and contact Sherry. However, if you're not sure, it doesn't hurt to have a call to Kate and talk that through with her, and discuss what her thoughts are on that as well. But if you know it's going to be statewide, I would just go directly to Sherry.
Okay, well, that's good. I probably still will loop Kate in. Just, we love working with her, but I want to make sure I'm working with the right folks if we're going statewide with this. I do have kind of a follow-up question. I missed the first few minutes of the webinar, and you might have answered this, but it's regarding the general operating funds. Is that also is that a state committee or is that a county committee? If we went to the general operating grant instead of a project grant.
Right. So when you apply, you're going to either apply for project or general operating.
Gotcha.
And or general support. So project support or general support.
Okay.
And so you apply for one of those, and the appropriate review committee looks at it.
Okay.
So if you come in for statewide, then statewide looks at it, whether it's project or general support. If
Right.
it's for a specific county, they would look at it, whether they're, so basically the review committees are looking at both.
Gotcha.
There's not one committee looking at project and one committee looking at general support.
Great.
The review committees look at both.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think you must have covered that in the first few minutes, because it makes perfect sense. And I didn't pick up on that afterwards. So thank you for revisiting that for me.
No, it's a great clarifying question. There's a possibility, if you have that question, Jared, that somebody else in the 375 people who are with us have that same question.
Okay, good. Well, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so let's go to Patricia, I see you in the Q&A and with your hand raised. So I don't know if you're asking the same question, but I'm going to allow you to talk. Can you speak, Patricia? Do I need to, let's see.
You might need to unmute.
I needed to unmute, so,
Great.
okay. This is the first time that we have gone for a grant from any of the community funds. So I have two questions. Number one is, in the process of filling out the application, can we start it and stop it?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have to complete it once I go online. Okay.
No.
Second question is, our property is manifold. It's historical, it's environmental, and we have a building that is now our history center, and we want to make it ADA compliant, which means we have to install ADA bathrooms and ramps. Just at that addition to an existing property would not be a capital, or would it be a capital?
So it depends, right? So typically in the past, we've said, because there are lots of buildings that need to become ADA compliant. And so the only way you would get funding for something to become ADA compliant would be if it has a project component. So let's say you needed to put in a ramp because you were going to be offering a specific program that worked with, let's say, seniors and youth who were going to be working on a quilt project for the bicentennial of the town or something like that, right? Like, so there has to be a reason, a project element to you for you to be able to put in that ramp or to make it ADA compliant. I guess you could apply, Laura, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but now that we have general support, you could apply for general support and you could use the funds to become ADA compliant. But typically in the past, the only way to get funding for a renovation to a building was to come in under project support.
Okay.
Yeah, so the only thing about that would be meeting the criteria for
Right.
general support.
And I'm not sure, yeah, and we're not sure. We're assuming you're located in Maine. I don't know if your operating budget is under 500,000. And you can't be any, can't be a municipality, can't be that long list of organizations. So you may or may not be eligible for a general support grant.
Okay, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. And the History Center, the object is we are storing, we've installed a vault, and we want to allow the citizens of the community, many of which are older because we are in Lincoln County, Bristol, and we want to allow them access to those records. So I don't know if that falls within project.
So
or
I would recommend that we actually, Patricia, have a conversation. We're getting down to like 12:57. We just have a couple of minutes left. I think the second part of your question, the first part, can you start and stop? Absolutely, an application. The second part's a little specific to your request. So let's chat after.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's see if we can get to one more. Sorry, John.
Yes, thank you. First, as someone who was a county advisor for 9 years, I commend you for continuing to make changes and make this process better for everybody. And
Thank
then
you.
The question I have is, if you're an organization that's applying to become a 501c3 status, do you have to have that by February 15th? Or let's say it's in the works and you think you're going to get it, but it may not come in until, let's say, March 15th.
So Laura, I'm going to defer to you on that. Did you hear his question is about?
No, I'm sorry, I'm answering questions.
I know you're trying to answer the questions in the Q&A, but specifically if you've applied for a 501c3 status, you don't have it by February 15th. What should you do? Should you use a fiscal sponsor? Or is there a threshold, a timeline that you have to have that 501c3 in hand? And I believe we encountered this last year, Laura, and I can't remember what the final decision was.
Oh, I'm not sure. I would say probably you would, if you don't have it, you'd probably need a fiscal sponsor. I mean, we just wouldn't be able to like literally cut the check to you. So we need someone to be able to make a check to. So we can double check with our grants manager, Amy Polian, but my first response would be you would need a fiscal sponsor if you don't have your if you don't have your tax status yet.
Because I think what we could do, John, is it's always important to make sure that if you are awarded a grant, we have a way to do that. And we can't if we don't have that fiscal sponsorship agreement. However, let's say that your 501c3 came through after you were awarded a grant, we might be able to have a conversation at that point in time. But again, that would be a really specific situation. So apply for it with a fiscal sponsorship if you don't have one yet, if you don't have it in hand.
I get it would only matter if you were applying for general funds, because if you weren't, you have a fiscal sponsor, but if you're applying for general funds, you need to have your 501c3. So that it's more pertaining to that.
So if you don't, for that specific question, John, if, can you apply for general support if you don't have your 501c3? No, you would have to wait a year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that is our last person with the hand up, and I think I've answered all of the Q&A. And we're 1 minute over, so thank you so much, everyone. And please feel free to contact us if you have any further questions. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Process is